I'd like to welcome you to the Calvert County Environmental Commission, and today's date is June 29th, 2026. Before I begin on the agenda, I'd like to just read something for everybody here, and it's to the commissioners, our residents, and any guests that we have. And I just want to say that I expect to have the assistance of everyone here in preserving order, and let our remarks be confined to the question at hand and entirely free from any kind of personal attacks, just so we can have harmony and prevail this meeting and have good information shared with everyone, and everybody gets to hear and listen and speak. And at the end of the meeting, we'll have the public comment section. We'll be sure to let you know when that happens. We don't have a real long agenda, so. All right, the call for the order, roll call for quorum. Abby Bard present.
Jeanette Wysocki.
David Campbell.
Andy Rogers.
Rich Rapier.
Jim Levin.
We have a quorum. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for June 29th, 2026?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And next on the agenda, approval of the minutes for May 18th and May 27th. You may have received a new email with a link to the actual site on the county site. So, and if you didn't get to read it, it's on there. So I need approval for the minutes for May 18th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for May 18th.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, passed. And the last approval for the minutes for May the 27th, 2026.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay, so today we'd like to welcome a presentation from Natalie Holdings. They will introduce their team and participate in our discussion here with the Environmental Commission regarding the proposed appeal Digital Park and accompanying Regional Park project. So if I may ask our guests to please come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I want to thank you for having us here. We look forward to having an open dialogue and discussion about environmental concerns with our proposed project. To start, what I would like to do is introduce myself and have my team introduce themselves. My name is Tommy Natelli. I'm Vice President of Natelli Holdings. We are proposing a project within the county to do data centers. And we've been listening to a lot of the concerns and been provided a lot of information, some of which the commission and others are looking for answers on. And what we are hoping to do is help provide some of those answers, not just from me, but my team of subject matter experts that can talk about a lot of the concerns that have been raised. And with that, I'm going to hand it over, and I'm going to step back and let someone a little bit smarter than me take my seat.
While they make that switch, I'll start with the introductions. If you'll allow, some of us are going to just give a little bit of background, nothing overly lengthy, but just so that you kind of know the background that brings us here to be able to have, productive conversation with you. So I'm Danielle Conroe. I'm a civil engineer. I'm licensed in the state of Maryland. I've been practicing in the area of land development for a little over 25 years. Mostly I do mixed use developments, single family residential. You may have heard, I did work here for Calvert County government for about 7 years. I was Deputy Director in Public Works. I oversaw mostly our roads programs, engineering review, highway maintenance, fleet maintenance, capital projects, inspections, things like that. I do have a significant background in stormwater management. I ran our WIP program, our rain barrel workshops, and our MS4 program when I was here. I left about 5 years ago, went back to the private sector, where I still do mixed use development and starting to sort of dabble in this particular use. So pleased to be here. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Szymanski. I'm a principal consultant in acoustics with Ramble company. I'm based out of Kansas City. My company has offices all over the United States. I've been in the acoustics industry for over 30 years now. Bachelor's in acoustical engineering from Purdue, master's in acoustical engineering from Penn State. I've been working in industry for in the kind of utility data center type industries for the past about 25 years. I'm also licensed in the state of Maryland, PE, and I look forward to answering your questions this evening. Thank you for your time.
All right, hi. I'm Steve Allison.
Speak of the microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, we'll figure this out. I'll have to do this a lot. I'm Steve Allison. I work for Rogers Consulting. I'm a principal there. I run the environmental department for the firm. And since I haven't talked to you guys for a little bit or ever, I want to go over my pedigree as well. I have Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from West Virginia University. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I am an ISA certified arborist. I also have wetland delineation training. I am the chair of the environmental committee for the Maryland Building Industry Association. I also sit on their board of directors. As well, to shed some more color, I've also been accepted as an expert witness, opinion witness in landscape architecture and arboriculture in Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Frederick County. And I've also spoken at multiple universities and conferences from the Society of Ecological Restoration, United States Green Building Council, West Virginia University, University of Maryland, all on maintaining living systems and understanding basically how the complete ecosystem can work in the built environment. Let me stop there.
Abby?
Yes.
I don't know if my microphone's working, but
I can hear you.
Mike Rooney is online. If you wanted to allow him to unmute and introduce himself for the record.
Sure.
Yes. Could we do that now? Please unmute him. We have another member online called in.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Rooney, and I'm with the Environmental Commission. Good to meet everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Good evening. My name is Craig Walslavin, principal at Rogers Consulting. I'm working there for 37 years. I have undergraduate degree in fish and wildlife biology, second undergraduate degree in landscape architecture from the College of Environmental Science and Forestry at Syracuse. I have a graduate degree in land planning from UVA. I've been an engineering team leader at our company since the year 2000. Been working on data centers on and off and roughly since 2005. I am also a licensed landscape architect in the state of Maryland and North Carolina.
Hi everyone, my name is Rob Swam. I work at Rogers Consulting as in, tall. Better? Yeah. I'm an environmental project manager at Rogers Consulting. I got my degree in environmental science from the University of Maryland. I've been doing wetland delineations, forest land delineations all over the state of Maryland for the last 11 years now. And what goes into that: permitting, plan preparation, clients, private, public, you name it, I've probably delineated it. And that's my role in this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Apparently my microphone doesn't work, so
Okay.
I'll have to go last.
Do we start questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it okay if we start questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, we had one thing that we wanted to make sure that we
Please.
address real quick,
Can-
and then we are all yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Finish your opening remarks. That's fine.
So we all read through the most recent. We've read each report and each letter that's come out of the commission, and we've gone through the most recent report. There was a question that was specific to our proposal at Offsite Area A. And there was a question as to why the area was different in the exclusive negotiating rights agreement that was like floating around online. There's an exhibit included in that agreement that shows a much larger area as an overlay than the area that we have proposed to the commissioners back on March 26th. And I just wanted to address that quickly. So that area was part of what we initially requested to review to see what, where we thought we might have a project. So we had, as part of the agreement, the ability to access those parts of the site. That is not anything outside of that proposal that you see dated March 26th from the commissioners, or you see on our website, or you've seen in any of our outreach sessions. That area is the only area that we're looking at currently. We are not looking at the rest of it. So I just wanted to address the discrepancy. That was something that was very specific to this site that I felt like was easy to get us on the same page. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go last.
Go ahead, Dave.
So, we're sharing a microphone here. So I just had a question about the cooling system. And Mr. Natelli called into one of our meetings before, and he was very informative, and it helped us out a lot. Apparently, the cooling systems are different from AWS and stuff. So, but still has some questions. So if the wastewater's coming in for cooling purposes, it's still going to have, I assume, like lots of bacteria, high nutrients, et cetera. Are you going to have some kind of reverse osmosis system first before it goes through your system, or is it just going to come right through?
Understood.
Yes. We receive the reclaimed water from the sewage treatment plant at whatever quality it is when it leaves their building before it getting sprayed out onto the fields. As it enters our site, we will polish that water to meet the standards of what we need it from what the end user needs. So there is a reverse osmosis system. Well, it first goes through a fine filter, then a reverse osmosis to bring the water quality to meet the standards necessary. It'll go through that cooling process and then be returned. What doesn't evaporate is returned to the sewer treatment plant to be mixed with all the rest of the sewage coming in from the rest of the county, gets treated all over again, sent back up to us.
Okay. We had the pleasure of touring the Appeal wastewater system last year or so.
Last year.
So we understand how that system works. Will there be, so you guys are running 24 hours a day all the time, but people aren't flushing their toilets on a regular basis. Right. How will you adjust for the increase and decrease in the amount of water that's coming through Appeal to satisfy your needs?
Right. On-site storage deals with the balance, but also recall or understand that we are also not constantly utilizing water for evaporative purposes for cooling. Most of the year, you don't need water for evaporative cooling to meet the cooling demand. It's only on those hottest days that we then utilize water for cooling, and that amount varies wildly depending on the end user and their particular mechanisms for cooling. Some won't even use water for cooling, so we still have to land on the end user. But to answer the question, on-site storage handles the peaks and valleys of what can be delivered to the site versus the demand.
Okay. So my other question was...
Could I...
Yeah, please.
How much water do you expect to use on a daily basis coming from the sewage treatment plant?
You're asking a question where we don't have an end user to tell us what kind of cooling system we utilize. However, all that said, in other projects, we go from 0 to an end user needing like 0.4 MGD for something of similar size, or less, actually, a little bit less than 0.4 MGD. That would be their peak demands, where they then supplement with on-site storage. The actual hottest day of the year, how much might they go for through a rate of consumption? You might hit a rate of 2 million MGD, but you hit it for an hour, that kind of thing. So don't confuse rate with total volume used.
So we know that what I read was about a third of the water that comes in will probably be evaporated when it's being used as it goes back
Depending
out.
on the day, yep.
Yeah. So will that impact, plus the temperature's going to be hot, I guess, coming back into the sewage treatment plant. Have you talked with the engineers at the sewage treatment plant, knowing that reduced water coming back in and the high temperature, will that have any effect on their treatment of the sewage?
No, the reclaimed water coming in will be treated the same on our end, where we polish it up and remove any and all pollutants. It goes through the cooling system and returned, technically, without all those pollutants that it came to us with. So it returns back to the county, again, mixes with everything else, and then goes back through their system.
So I like the use of the word polish, it's a nice euphemism. But, when you polish it, there's a lot of yucky water that comes out. How are you going to dispose of the water that comes out of the RO system?
So the reverse osmosis system and the fine filter catches it, and it gets disposed of back to the landfill or wherever it needs to go.
Oh, so it's going to go right back to repeal? Okay, but it'd be in a concentrated form then?
It comes out as, solid, and so it's the same, whatever the county's system is for dealing with their solid that they take out of the water, we would simply follow that same process.
Okay. And have you talked with the engineers there? Are they all on board? Does it seem okay with them?
Yeah, there's an existing reclaimed water line that comes from that sewage treatment plant up to the site as today. I mean, it's there. So the system was contemplated and anticipated. Many other municipalities utilize the same process and systems. So it's not like we're dreaming up something new.
Okay. And so you always have regular potable water. We've never been in at a data center, so I imagine you have like a little kitchen or bathrooms and things like that. So you're just going to tie into the regular municipal system for that?
So you have a domestic component of your building. For sinks, water fountains, toilets, that all comes in as a separate system. We'll go back out the sewer system, often as a separate line, depending on how the municipality wants to receive it.
Okay.
So we can, on site, we will likely have two sewer lines, one for the domestic, one for the cooling water. We'll likely have three water lines, one for the cooling, one for the domestic, and a third for our fire.
That's what I was going to ask about fire. So your fire suppression system would just be water sprinklers?
Sprinklers are what's been used in the latest data centers that we've encountered. Sprinkler system is how they fight their fires within the data halls.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any thought for an auxiliary supplemental water system in addition to the sewage treatment plant?
We haven't gotten that far on this particular job because, again, we don't even have an end user to find out what our water demand is. That said, on other sites, we have talked about where there's on-site stormwater management ponds and the like, that maybe we could utilize that water as a tertiary supply. Should our first, second, and third opportunities go by the wayside. But usually they'd be shutting down before they get to that point.
You said shut down. Can a data center shut down operation
Absolutely.
without?
So understand that they don't want to. They do everything they can to avoid that. Everything is redundant at least twice. And they do their best to avoid that. However, all things fail. One way or another, they cycle the facility down. And that is why not only are they redundant in all of the infrastructure coming to these sites themselves are redundant to one another. So indeed, you can lose, this region, not only this site, but you could potentially lose a region, and another region picks up the load. And it's not a permanent thing, but they can carry each other's load while whatever it is that it impacted the functionality of that facility is brought back online. So, you hear many fears they're going to, in an emergency condition, they're going to take all our generator fuel, or they're going to take all the power that we have. Now they'll likely just spin down. and wait for that condition to pass and then bring it back up again.
That kind of leads me to another question that you've already, people have talked about energy all the time, going stuff, but I was wondering about the cabling itself. So once you guys get your data center built, if you get it built, you can't just call Comcast and say, hey, hook us up now, you know, we're ready to go.
Right.
Aren't you gonna need like a whole lot of cabling coming in and out?
You're talking about the fiber connections.
Yeah, like we're
Yeah.
on a peninsula, like I thought data center would want to be part of a grid, but we're just like, everything's coming down from the north and going back out again.
Right.
Is that correct? Or are you gonna try to connect to other counties or?
The fiber is not my best field, but I will tell you, when we first started this back in 2005, we started looking at sites for various data centers. The first thing we looked at was where the fiber was. What is its location? And then we were building in close proximity to that fiber, then brought in water and power and everything else. All of that was, the fiber was the least plentiful element. Now the fiber is the most plentiful. There is a lot of fiber down here already. To the extent that they would have to augment that, I can't answer. That's where I've come up short. But of all the things that we've been looking at and I'm trying to talk to end users about, no one's been concerned about fiber. It's power and water and communities.
I am jotting down anything that requires follow-up, though, so we will see if we
Yeah.
can find an expert and continue to engage.
I would appreciate that,
Mhm.
because that seems to be the one thing that nobody has talked about at all, you know. I don't want
Agreed.
people like lose their internet, you know, because of something that's supposed to be helping the internet.
It's a good question, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, when you're not using water to cool a facility, heat's going somewhere. So how is that being dealt with?
If we're not using water for cooling,
Not using water
say
for-
it's March and it's still cool enough outside that we don't need the water for augmenting the cooling. We just don't take it and it goes into the sewer treatment plant and gets treated as it normally would before we came.
Right, I'm not worried about the water, but you're gonna be, but you still have to cool your chips somehow, right? You got chips running. I've got a phone in my pocket, it gets hot if
Yeah, it
I
gets hot, right.
don't mind it, right?
So- You have do you mind if I get into the whole cooling system then? We'll have a closed loop cooling system. So from the chip, there'll be basically a heat plate sitting on top of the chip that has water coming in and out of it. So we will cycle in water to that chip. That's generally going to be about 90 degrees. It will remove, extract, absorb the heat from that chip and leave that chip and go to the other end of the data hall where it goes through a big radiator, if you will, a heat exchange, into another loop. That loop will take the heat will be exchanged from the inside loop, the first loop that comes off the chip, goes through the heat exchanger and exchanges that heat to again, another closed loop that goes from that heat exchanger outside. So you have two closed loops, one that stays inside the building the whole time, and another one that takes it from inside the data hall and brings it outside.
Okay.
Once it gets to the outside, it goes through another big, cooling facility that I don't want to call it a cooling tower, but it's a big air conditioning unit.
Okay.
Again, a closed loop, and think of it as a big old car radiator. And that has an electric fan, fan powered by electricity, that blows air across the radiator, where this water, that the heat was exchanged from inside, goes to this outside radiator. The outside air is blown across the radiator. That fluid is cooled down from roughly 120 degrees back down to 90. So we're only taking off 30 degrees of temperature. And it's brought back to the heat exchanger that's inside the building. And that cool water is now what cools that inside loop. And that inside loop goes back to the chip, removes the heat. And so we have these two closed loop systems running back and forth. Most of the year, again, depending on the systems that you're using, but it could be upwards of 95% of the year, that is a sufficient system to cool down the inside water. Now, there are going to be times where you get a hot week. Next week is going to be very hot. Likely that outside air is going to be insufficient by itself to cool the circulating cooling fluid. And that is when we will inject the water. So that reclaimed water now inside this cooling tower gets sprayed against the radiator. It does not come in contact with the inside cooling fluid at all. It's just cooling the radiator itself down. So it's sprayed onto the radiator as air is being blown across the radiator. That is sufficient to augment that cooling methodology, bring that cooling fluid back from 120 back down to 90 and back into the building. The amount of water necessary will then depend on what that outside temperature is, what the actual wet bulb temperature is, and bring us back down into place. Some of that water that gets sprayed on the radiator will evaporate. The rest goes back into a trough. It'll get recycled several times, as many as 3 times generally, where it gets recycled through before, due to evaporation, will start to accumulate some minerals in the lake, at which point that water is blown off, and that's what we return back to the sewage treatment plant. So it comes in when necessary, when it's hot enough, and that reclaimed water gets sprayed onto the radiator 3 times, back out to the sewage treatment plant. Okay. So most of the year, the majority of the year, we're not using any water for cooling. It's just when you hit those days where the outside temperature is too hot. Now that temperature itself, how hot is it outside that you need to then augment, that changes over time based on the technology of the chips used. Mm-hmm. So it used to be when the outside air was 75 degrees, you need to augment. Around 2001, 2002, we were starting to use 85 degrees. Last year, one of our projects, they went to 90 degrees. So you could have an outside air temperature of 90 degrees, and we can still be augmenting. Oh, we wouldn't have to augment with water just yet. As they build more resilient chips, whatever the other systems are, that need for water augmentation will change. Other places that don't use any water at all, when it gets hot enough outside that the outside air isn't enough, they just turn on another outside unit, another power unit. So some users will inject the water because it's 30% more efficient at cooling. Others that don't use water, they just turn on another outside unit. So think of your heat pump as the best example. You're cooling down with one heat pump, that outside unit. When it gets really hot, a second one will kick on. Sure. That type of thing.
I don't quite understand. Are you going to be using a cooling tower, or are these just fans evaporating?
I hesitate to call it cooling tower because then everyone thinks of the 3 Mile Island cooling tower, right? And that's not.
Well, we got a couple of them at Chalk Point.
Right. So that's the image that everyone brings up. But the better is an oversized outside heat pump. Instead of your outside heat pump being, 30 inches by 30 inches typically, this one might be more like 20 by 20 or something of that nature. But it's essentially the same technology. It's an inside radiator that has a fan that blows air across it, and the fluid goes through the radiator. It doesn't come in contact with the air itself.
About how many fans do you expect to use?
I don't have that answer.
Less than 100?
We can get you that answer, but it'll be a guess based on, we'll take a couple different users. That many, we're talking 300 megawatts. We can do an example as to if it's an all air-cooled facility, we can go that route, count it up, and if it's a water user, we can go through that route. The water user, while it uses more water, it uses less power and it's quieter. Once you bring in a non-water user, they've got to add more of those fans, so therefore they're going to use more power and they're also going to create more sound. What was it? Okay.
Okay, well, if you read all our reports, you know that one of the couple questions you get raised right here, one of which you're cooling water from 130 degrees to 90 degrees, what I understood you to say. Right?
Generally, that water is 120 degrees.
120 degrees, sorry.
And we'll be looking to knock it down to around 90 degrees, so it's a 30-degree delta.
Right. So, but the follow-up question is how much heat are we actually putting into the atmosphere? Because how much heat are we actually putting in the atmosphere? And we've seen, I think there's just one study that we were able to find where they looked at, the effects of the heat spread from data centers raising temperatures up to 5 or 6 degrees out to a distance of 5 or 6 miles.
With all due respect, did you actually read the study?
I don't think I read the whole thing, no, if I read part of it. But
the results are highly questionable, and we could go line by line if you'd like, but that report has a lot of holes in it, and I don't think it's accurate. And again, we can go through it if you'd like, but
okay, so
let's put it this way. So Northern Virginia is the greatest density of data centers in the world, all clustered in just north of Dulles Airport. And within Fairfax and Loudoun counties, I think it's like 620 data centers. Nearly all of them using that air-cooled system, whether it's water augmented or not. They're blowing air through to cool down their chips. Again, it may not be, most of them aren't even closed-loop type systems. They're just open air from the data halls going to the cooling chips blowing out. You do not see, when you have your weather report, that they talk about the Dulles Airport area going to be 10 degrees hotter, or even any degrees hotter. You don't see that mapped out. You don't see that in any of the other clusters of high-density data centers. Interestingly, the report, if you wanted to do a report on what the effects are of AI data centers, these high power users, why wouldn't you go to Northern Virginia, go to Texas, go to Georgia? These are the places that are the greatest densities of AI data centers in the world. They didn't choose to do that. They went to a couple of obscure sites that have a lot of issues. The report talks about, you just mentioned, raising the temperature, the air temperature. The report clearly states in their methodology that they're using the satellite data as for land surface temperatures, the temperature of the asphalt, the temperature of the roof. They don't have a methodology where they convert that surface temperature to air temperature.
Sure.
Never in their report, when you actually read it, do they talk about the air temperature rising. They just simply discuss surface temperatures. From a from the satellite of NASA with a 1 kilometer resolution. I can keep going. It's just, you really can't, you read through that and it's so many questions. They talk about 20 years of data. The AI data centers, they started coming about around 2020. We're 6 years into AI data, and most of them haven't even been plugged in yet. So many of them are in the process of being built right now throughout the country. Very few of them are actually up and running, and where they are, again, clusters, Northern Virginia, Texas, Atlanta. Why they didn't choose to study those locations to get an accurate reading, to give us an understanding as to if it really exists or not, is questionable.
Well, having done a lot of studies myself, not of this question, but I would want to pick a site where you can isolate something, not where you're in a heat zone already. I mean, Texas, you got a lot of industrialization around DC, and I don't know the other sites, so whatever signal you have could easily be lost.
What they're experiencing is, or what they're collecting is a urban heat island by surface temperature, not by functionality of the facility. That's clearly just in the graphs that they use. On page 3 or 4, they have this graph that it's negative 10 months to zero when they say the facility was turned on, became operational.
Right.
And then another 10 months, and you see this massive spike immediately. Data centers don't turn on overnight like that. Once you complete them, it takes almost a year to get all the data halls up and running. If it was due to cooling effects of that heat that's coming in, which is the whole purpose of supposition of the report, is that the cooling necessary for such a large power load is having this impact. You would have seen a line at an angle, like a 45 degree, going out 10 to 12 months as they slowly took each of these data halls on. What you saw was a spike within 2 weeks of a temperature going bang up. Assuming that their data collection is correct and that they were able to isolate a data center on a 1 kilometer grid, that's the resolution of the imagery that they were using. What you're seeing is not operations, this thing turning on. You're seeing that they finally put the roof on the building. It would take about 2 weeks to put the roof in place. Then you might see a temperature spike, just as you would when you do a Walmart or any other large building. You collect that, you suddenly have a roof, it has a different reflection. Now the satellite is picking it up as heat. It would never, ever go in a 2-week span operational. That's my heat pump.
Interesting.
You look at the areas that they studied, the Mexico, Brazil, and Spain. All 3 locations are sparsely vegetated. So you have no effect from any vegetation, where locally here, we know that the forest, and Steve will, I can see him squirming right now, he wants to jump in. The forest tree canopies have a major effect on urban heat islands. In these 3 study areas, they're all arid locations.
Sure.
No potential absorption. The Mexico one, first thing we started doing, we started looking at where are these data centers that they're talking about. It took me a while to find them, but what I did find within that same area was greenhouses, acres, like greenhouse pockets, 300 acres apiece of greenhouses set up, all within that same, the kilometer resolution of a satellite imagery is going to pick that up too. And there was no mention in the report about teasing those out. So again, if we have another hour, we can keep talking or talk on the side about it. I'm happy to do so.
I will put the question a different way.
Yep.
How much heat would you expect? I mean, you're going to be putting heat in. You just mentioned just the roofs themselves will raise the temperature.
So the roof itself, and that's where we then start jumping into LEED and all the rest, where we start taking opportunities with the colors of the roof, what you put on the roof.
Sure.
A lot of data centers that used to have a lot of their equipment up on a roof.
Right.
That equipment typically dark in color and all the rest. Most of them have put the equipment down on the ground now.
Okay.
It makes roof construction that much cheaper, which allows them to have a full white colored roof to help with that reflective nature and not have the absorption. So you start working from that front to reduce your heat signature, but it's really no different because we're not that much bigger, if in some cases we're smaller, than warehouses and fulfillment centers and so forth. So when you look at our footprint, particularly a 2-story product, which is what most people are moving to now, it's 100 to 120,000 square feet of the footprint. That's a Walmart, So, I'm sorry. So that would be how we would initially approach that.
Okay. Good answers.
Well, since you queued up Steve.
Yeah, I can. I've taken a good look at this.
Microphone.
You can slide it.
I'm not going to get this right. All right, can you hear me? As close as possible. I'm taking a good look at this report, and yeah, that was a great primer. So many different facets to really look at here. Land surface temperature versus ambient air, right? And so we saw these pockets of what was the minimum? Like a 0.3 difference in land surface temperature up to 16 degrees, and they took the average, and it came out to about 3 degrees. But in Fahrenheit, it's, I don't know, about 2 or 3 degrees that actually comes out. Well, when you look at ambient temperature itself, and that's 2 meters above the ground, okay? So about 6.5 feet. When you look at that, there's no real breakdown of how do you do a calculation of land surface temperature. This was my first thing. How can I break this to ambient air, which I really care about, what wildlife impacts, what trees will feel. How do you remove this? There's no actual calculation, but there is a rule of thumb. And a rule of thumb is about 20 to 50% is what would be an ambient air from your land surface temperature. So if you're saying there is like an average of 3 degrees globally over 8,000 sites, you come down to maybe 1.6 degrees, 1.8 degrees that you might be feeling in ambient air. Okay. So when you look at this study and you see land surface temperature, you really have to think about that really is just your asphalt parking lot, and then you step into the grass. And I think we've all done that and seen a dramatic difference. The point that they use that, and that NOAA actually uses ambient temperature when they actually look at, is the Earth warming, right? They did a study in 2025. They went ahead and did the ambient from land modeling, and they assessed from 2020 to 2025, there was a 0.8 degree increase, just globally. So we have a global review of 8,000 data centers selected in rural areas to kind of flush out urban increased heat. And there's nowhere in the study they talk about this other global study of ambient air of how that could be impacted as well. So if you have a 1.6 degree change in 20 years, but we didn't take into account, or did they try to suss this out, where there was also a 0.8 degree increase as well. So if you take that out, we're dealing with maybe a degree or so that would be a change from just the surface layer of these buildings. Another point that I saw, and I think they tried to do it, and I think the intent was there, but they didn't create a control. And what I mean by that is the way that they studied this is they did difference to differences. And what I mean by that is they looked at the area of where they were doing the data center, where they were doing it. They looked at 5 years prior. Okay, so take, I think it's Benji, Mexico. It was an area that they said they had hyperscalers. I couldn't find them, and that's a whole different question on the meter 262 acre kind of plot they did from the resolution. But in this area, they looked at before the temperatures, and these are rural areas with vegetation and forest, and then they solely looked at that area with 1 kilometer going out, 10 kilometers out, of what happens when you put the data center in there. So you go rural area, only look at that pixel, 62 acre pixels, and then data center. So now you have land conversion from vegetation to building. That could be a school, that could be a distribution center, but that's what they're studying, the pixel heat on that. Okay, well with that area, you see a rise in temperature because you've changed the development. You've changed the area. So hold that point right there. Then what they needed to do was take that same local region, nothing impacted by that type of development, and tell us in 20 years how the temperature rose there. That's your control point, okay? Because that tells you without development, this did not increase. With development, this did. But none of those studies existed, okay? They did it, their control was 1 kilometer out, 10 kilometers out, and they saw anomalies in the pixels, right? These are satellite images, and they said, well, kind of to your point, we see degrees increasing past the data center. These things are heating up the areas. Well, the report doesn't necessarily say that. It says based on studying, he said NOAA's, or the MODIS model is 1 kilometer. When University of Cambridge did this study, they scratched it down to 500 meter by 500 meter, which kind of gives you that 62 acre pixel that they take a look at. What they did to actually figure out, and you can read through it, this is the whole poking, I guess, part, is that they didn't discuss that temperature radiated out from that 1 kilometer or 10 kilometers. What they said was the land use changed. Something changed in those areas outside that hyperscale data center. So you go 1 kilometer, 10 kilometers, something that was lush and green, we go Spain, Mexico, Brazil, in that area, and there's 20 years, that wasn't green anymore. Well, that could be there's nothing in the study that says that that was from a data center use. It could be from enlarged roads, it could be a new school, it could be buildings, commercial, urban. We don't know. It doesn't actually break that out. It didn't find a radiating effect through there. It just found some parcels, some pixels, changed their temperature in those 20 years. And then they took that and put that as an average of all 8,000 or 8,600 sites, and then put it into a metric. So that was one of the things that was kind of a misnomer when this article was picked up by multiple online sources that went ahead and basically said, this is going to hold temperature, it's going to radiate out because of those anomalies. And just based on the article, it doesn't state that. You can't necessarily take this study, and it's not intention. I'm sure if we would interview them, it's not intention wasn't to say this is what's going to happen in a site-specific location. Cove is surrounded by forest. That is a completely kind of different setup where we look at how we treat urban heat island effect with forest canopy. So that area will have a dilution effect, a thermal cliff, if you will, coming from an existing site that now is surrounded by mature forest up to almost 2 miles into the Chesapeake Bay. Forest, through evapotranspiration, does do a significant change to temperature, not just land surface from your foot on asphalt to your foot on grass, but going through that mature forest canopy. So that's not sycamores just sitting in an island or crepe myrtle sitting in an island. That's a dense, mature forest. Those do combat heat island temperatures. So when you take that study and you look at specificity from it, how can I apply this global study to something regionally? It starts falling apart right at the point of satellite. It doesn't necessarily work that way that you can apply that. And that's some of our ongoing points with how we can't really move forward with it, even though it has really good talking points of being aware that these things could be changing something. But that's what happens when we convert forest, meadows, vegetation to development. And that's kind of what it was pointing out by only measuring the land surface temperature. And there's many more complications that go into that. And what I love to talk about forest ecology, we can talk there, but I'm going to stop one moment and let you guys.
Okay. Yep, you've given us a lot of information against the Amazon website, so that's good. But the Nutelli site, if I can call it that, already has most of its trees removed, deforested, et cetera. So it's a very different animal from what's going on across the Route 4. Will you be doing any reforesting after the data centers are built? Is there any plan to do that, to try to minimize the open area?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as part of the environmental department, what I look to do, there is room, from my understanding, that there can be on-site reforestation, afforestation, planting, right? And the way that I look at it, if you take this area, I think it's, I don't remember I think it's like almost 50 acres that's sitting as a gravel pad right now. And I think it's been sitting there for about 10 years like that. You already have a heat island effect, if you think about it. That's not forest, and it's been like that for 10 years. The way I look at that is, yes, I think you can do planting, but I'd like it to be very surgical. And what I mean by that is regardless of what that study failed in that it only talked about land surface temperature. I care about real things that are going to change, and this building is going to have power and do all these different things. So throw the study out. Anything that's going to impact those existing forests, what I do on most of my projects, I only have maybe 1 or 2 projects out of my 30 active projects that are data centers, so it's more ecologically based. I look at the forest edge treatment. And why is that important? Okay, forest edge is the most diverse area if you're going to talk about transient species. You're talking about where birds actually hunt, or birds and bats actually hunt and feed. That's your live area. Most birds can't fly through mature forest. So that is important. If they're fast, they can't necessarily do that to actually hunt. We go ahead and do forest edge treatment that goes ahead and works on the meadow grasses to shrubs to small trees, and it creates this strata that protects those existing forest trees that were interior forest, and they were created to be interior forest, or sorry, they were interior forest that when this was removed turned to exterior. Really problematic because you don't actually have your canopy. You're almost lollipop trees. Well, it's been sitting like that for 10 years. I would go ahead and create this strata that basically buffers those areas from wind throw. If you remember when the intercounty connector was built, I was part of a portion of that. Tons of trees came down because tulip poplars just didn't have any canopy. Yes, this has been sitting there, but we would create that, and that would kind of be an insulating buffer to make sure that the interior forest, even if temperatures increased around there, still remain with the carbon sequestration opportunities they can have. So what you're doing is you're creating that thermal drop-off with new species, and you increase the leaf scale index. So you just have much more to create more evapotranspiration on that point. So when I'm thinking about that, yes, I'm going to be strategic in there. I'm not just going to go ahead and put a bunch of red maples and call it a day with some black-eyed Susans and we did our planting. There's more you can do there that actually is beneficial, A, to anything that lives around there, and B, actually buffering some of the temperature that could possibly radiate from any type of industrial building that you would put on your existing gravel pad.
Can I just add on to the question of, I think you were asking about clearing. We're not intending on doing additional clearing. I mean, the whole reason that we found this site to be ideal is it's a redevelopment site. That is what, drew us to it, right? The infrastructure is there certainly, but it's a redevelopment site. It's a good opportunity for responsible development when development is going to be had. So we don't intend on cutting more, and as Steve just elaborated on, if anything, we should have room probably on the southwestern corner. If you've seen any of our renderings, that's probably where we would be, which is going to be really healthy for that stream corridor through there. That is where we would look to do some supplemental forest planting.
Thank you.
Rich. Okay, my turn. Okay, so I have a couple questions here, and some of these are for you, Mr. Natale. What drew you to this site? So it was donated to the county, to the people, to become a park. So what drew you to this site? What made you decide to make a pitch to Calvert County to put data centers here? Did someone from the government contact you, or did you just see this as a, let me make a pitch?
Well, so I'll answer it. I don't know how this is part of the Environmental Commission's purview, but.
Well, so we've been listening to our residents for months talk about how this land was donated to the county to become a park. So I was just curious, like, why are we even doing this right now? You don't have an end user. Like, I've been sitting here listening to this the whole time, and I'm just curious why we're here.
Regardless of whether or not we have an end user, it's providing answers to a lot of questions that we've been hearing, and also bringing people in that work in the industry and provide correct information.
Well, right, but my question is, why this site? What brought Natale Holdings to this site?
Well, we looked at the whole county when we started, and we were looking at, and our ENRA shows it, we were looking at the time, all the acreage back there. And as we were identifying what we thought was the best place, given the proximity to resources that we would need to utilize to make the site work, as well as the prior use that was on the site and what was proposed to be there, we thought that proposing this site on that property and relocating the park to a property that we thought was better suited for a park, not near a gun range, not near the sewer treatment plant, not near the landfill, and in proximity to those 3 schools, was a viable option. So it was our idea to propose this to the board as if you let us build on county property, we will build a park for the county that the county's been wanting to build for 10 years.
Okay. So did you conduct any environmental or health impact studies on Calvert County specifically before you made this pitch? Did you do any?
Everything we did was site-specific.
So you didn't look at like a mile radius, health impacts, air pollution, noise pollution, anything like that?
Yeah, so we've done, I have Jeff here to talk about the sound and acoustics of data centers, and he can get into that. We are very confident that we can handle any sound impacts within the site interior, and it won't be affected outside the property line. And as far as emissions, that's heavily regulated by Maryland Department of the Environment, and we would have to go through their whole permit applications to meet their, be within what their thresholds are for this area.
Okay. So I have some questions about the park that you brought up. So you talked about the $30 million bond. Have you talked to the property owners that own that land that you suggested to become a park?
Yeah, I have that park under contract. I have that property under contract.
Okay. So the $30 million bond, does that include like purchasing the property?
No,
So the $30 million,
that's
that's,
just for the construction of the park.
so does that include like grading and
Yep.
site prep and all that stuff? So the $30 million would go towards the site prep?
Yeah.
And then the things that you have talked about building there?
The fields, all the programming, yeah, that's all.
The $30
inclusive.
million is based on a study that we did and a cost estimate that we prepared to take that piece of property to completion of the master park that the community had input on in 2021.
Okay.
Yep.
So you have a contract for that, the proposed park? We'll call it the proposed park. You have a contract for that?
Yes.
You also had indicated when you were at the library that you were looking at the Sanders Lake Sportsman Club property?
We have that property under contract, and that is so we can have access to where we need to build the substation and give SMECO primary access to that substation without having to go through the data center site.
Buying up a lot of land in Calvert County. When my understanding, because I wasn't at the library event, my understanding was that you said you might have to donate that Sanders Lake property. Do I have that understanding correct?
Whatever we wouldn't use, if I'm not going to use it, why not? It's already in preservation. Why not give it to the county and have the county hold it, or whoever wants to hold it? But I have no use for it after I get my access.
I've spoken with the Piscataway Conoy people. Would you be willing to donate it to them, the original inhabitants of this land? They have a land trust.
We could look into that. I'm not familiar with their history on the land, but we can take that under advisement.
They're the original inhabitants of this land, and that would be a great gesture at the point in time that you no longer need to use the Sanders Lake property to give the land back to the people who were first here.
I personally have no issue with it, but I can't make any commitments today.
Okay. My last question is about North Carolina. So Natelli Holdings was going to be, had proposed a similar site in North Carolina, the New Hill Digital Campus.
That's correct.
And Natelli Holdings withdrew that application, right?
That we did.
What was the reason that you withdrew it, if I can ask?
There were multiple variables as to why we withdrew it. So for background on that site was in the future comprehensive use plan for the town of Apex to be an industrial corridor. Its siting was next to the nuclear power plant, in between a major roadway, which is US Route 1 running north to south, and old US Route 1 on the other side. There's rail, there's gas running through it, there's transmission running through it. That site was highly complex because we had to first annex it into the town. The town did not have data center zoning when we were doing it, so we also had to propose a zoning text amendment, and we had to propose a map amendment. So we had 3 things going at once. It seemed to have overwhelmed the town council. We came up on some deadlines and needed to pull back. Does not mean that we are done with the town of Apex. We've just pulled back so they can figure out what they want to do, and if there's a path forward, we will reevaluate.
Okay, thank you for that. I've heard you say where were all the people worried about data centers when we did the comprehensive rezoning. Were you aware that when public comment opened, or when public comment was had on Article 18 for the data centers, that when Article 18 went through the public comment period, data center language was not in the article? Were you aware of that?
So again, I'm happy to talk about this stuff, but we're here to talk about the environmental concerns, not the process or anything.
Well, that's a question for county staff.
Yeah.
It is. That's a question for county staff. Thank you.
We're having a conversation. It's
What's-
something that we've brought up.
But it is, though.
How tall is 2 stories? Talk about that.
Good.
Let me, excuse me, let me just add a couple questions in here. One of the reasons we got involved is that we received a lot of input from the community at large. Basically, everybody down in Lusby and elsewhere throughout the county. We've looked at the environmental concerns, and we raised some issues. You have environmental staff that know what they're doing, their business. Both sites are unique. One, the AWS one, is we look at it as a go, no-go kind of a idea in our minds. It's just too unique, too critical landmass that to go mess with bulldozers and stuff. And so that in itself just comes out to us now. The Natali site is also has a different set of, baggage in one sense. So we're hearing from the people that are going to be living there. And I guess I want to ask you, because we have some public here, we have people online, we also have an audience of the public. And I guess I want to ask, we've looked at all the proper zoning and planning, and we're checking all the boxes, the technical terms, the cooling systems being answered in details, and we've learned a lot from all your specialists here. In your mind, in all of you, I guess it's a question for all of the staff here, your staff, your team, Tom. Is it safe? Are you willing to say that if the county should proceed forward and approve this site for a data center, are you sure the health and safety for the people that live here and all the concerns that have been raised and all the other, I guess we can go look at all the data centers, all the health issues that have been raised with different data centers. Are you fairly confident, what's your level of confidence that this is not a health and safety issue, this is not a clear and present danger to anyone other than the land that is going to be taken and turned into a data center?
I do not feel that there is a health and safety issue with it. I do want to say this. We are very conscious of all the concerns, and as a developer, it is our job to come in and show that we can mitigate or lessen a lot of those concerns that everybody has. You talk health and safety. Emissions are a big thing that I know keeps coming up. Emissions are heavily regulated by the state. sound, and I want to get to Jeff and let Jeff speak because I know sound is a massive topic, and there's a lot of health and safety around sound. And Jeff is an expert in that and has been doing it for a very long time. And I think it'd be very beneficial for this commission to hear it, whether I move forward or not. And, you know, as a small family company that operates in Maryland, we wouldn't be, if you look at our track record over 45 years, we wouldn't be coming and doing something if we thought it was going to be a detriment to the health and safety of the community. I know that falls on some deaf ears because I can hear the sighing behind me, but at the same time, we don't want to harm anybody. And we don't think with the new technologies that are out there and with everything that we can put in place, a lot of the concerns are solvable and not going to be an issue for the surrounding community.
Yeah, the issue of sound is a huge element that we have not covered tonight.
Right. And I know Craig wants to speak real quick, and then we'll get to sound.
Craig?
Keep in mind that data center designs and implementation has been evolving over time. And you just have to think or look back to Northern Virginia and the reasons that data centers were there in the first place. And if you've had the ability to sit through some of Buddy Reiser's presentations with Northern Virginia, you realize they took on a great opportunity that was presented to them. They had an internet exchange point sitting right in their community, and it was sitting right in the glide path of Dulles Airport. They had this ground that they didn't know what to do with. They weren't putting houses there. They couldn't get businesses to go there. It was, again, planes are going right overhead. What do we do with this space? And along came data centers at the same time. So they pushed the data center opportunities and built them everywhere. And you know, they were a Dillon rule state. You know, the local community has all the power. The landowners have the power. They could come in, and they did, and they built everywhere and anywhere. But even still, it really didn't matter initially, because they had these facilities that were underneath the approach of Dulles Airport. As they continued to grow, now they started to have conflicts with the residential communities, because again, that area was void of residential, but they spread out, they come in contact with residential. Now they have to react. And that's what we've been doing ever since, is each and every data center campus that goes in is learning lessons from the ones before it. And you look at, you can go onto a satellite data, the Google imagery, and you see these large data centers immediately adjacent to a residential community. I mean 200 feet away. And that's just nuts, abhorrent. You wouldn't want to do that. You would never do that. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, the data center was there first. The houses came in after the fact. But let it be that the data centers, they gobbled up every bit of corner that they could in that corridor, because they needed to have the proximity to that data center, to that internet portal, that point, that access point. And latency was an issue. They could only be within 20 or 30 kilometers as the wire is run to that exchange point. So all the ground in that area was highly valued, and they built on every square inch of it. But AI comes along, and that doesn't require that latency issue like all the data centers before that. So everything that was built in the early 2000s up to 2020 were all co-locations and the like. They weren't AI hyperscalers because they just didn't exist prior to that. 2020 comes along, AI starts becoming a thing, and these large hyperscale campuses start happening, but they are no longer tethered to that internet exchange point. So that's why we start going out looking for areas that we could put these in. And to kind of touch on your question before, why here? My job was to look everywhere. I looked all up and down the state of Maryland, following power lines, looking for where they would cross opportune areas. And I follow a power line that crosses a big gravel laydown area that no one seems to be utilizing. Circle that spot. Let's go back and look at that again. There's dozens of sites every week that I circle, and they fall out for one reason or another. Some of them advance. Some of them advance to find out, okay, who owns that? Oh, the county owns that. That's great. And you just keep going until you hit a wall. And sometimes that wall makes you stop. Sometimes you come up with a solution for that wall, and you keep going. But the evolution of the design continues.
But
And
these people
so-
were promised a park, and you want to come in and set a data center on top of it.
Yeah, and
And they went through a whole public process. They decided what they wanted in it.
Right, so again, that's one of those elements that you hit. Okay, there was supposed to be a park there. Can we give you a park elsewhere? Yes or no? And all these, this is the process. Yeah, I hear it behind me. Say no, okay. If you don't want it, then maybe this doesn't happen. But if we can come up with a solution to each and every question, then maybe this thing keeps going. If we can't come up with a solution for each and every question, then maybe it stops or something else occurs. But that's how you start. You follow the power lines and you look for an opportunity where you have large
So
enough.
are
piece of
anywhere
land.
that we have power lines in the county open for consideration?
No, that's what's the best spot.
Well,
I
but
look-
we
I looked
have,
at-
I mean, we've got a nuclear power plant right there, and we've got power lines going both ways. So
I didn't consider that.
they run about 5 miles from my house in Chesapeake Beach. So, is the open land along the power lines up there for consideration?
No, I looked at most of them. I can't say I looked at every square inch, right?
So
But I
you're
looked
looking at the high voltage power lines.
I look at the high voltage power lines. I need proximity to water. Sewer treatment facility was right there. It had water, had sewer, had the area of land. It was already impacted. It was perfect, right? From that initial look and that initial check. You go up the road, you follow that power line, you don't have sewer capacity. So automatically you're out. You don't even have water up there, out. And so you go along, these things drop out really fast, and you keep going. But back to the original comment, the community has evolved. We've gotten better. Most of the generators in Northern Virginia are Tier 2. We're proposing Tier 4. Most of the offsets there are only 100 feet, 200 feet, and to your residential communities. We're 900 feet from the road, 1,200 feet to the closest residence. We can build in all those buffers and address the acoustics. We can address the water usage utilizing reclaimed water. Everyone was worried that we were going to use groundwater. We're not using groundwater. So we take each of the concerns and questions and we try and answer them as best we can. A lot of them we can answer, some of them we have to wait for that end user to come up with the final answer. But it's an evolution of the design. You can't take what was done in Northern Virginia 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. The AI data centers, they just didn't exist. But you can't take that early evolution of a design and assume that that's what we're putting in here. You have to look at what the community has come up with, how they've evolved, how they've addressed the concerns of the communities, each and every step along the way. Water usage was an issue. They've resolved most of that issue. So every concern has gotten addressed as best we can. New ones come up, we'll address those again.
Well, just in the interest of time,
I'm sorry.
can we, thank you very much for explaining that. Can we have some sound expertise?
Absolutely.
It's one of the highest rated problems or issues that have come up. I have friends that live in Virginia, and they tell me they hear those machines running all night long. We're also concerned about the fragility of the ecosystem, and we have critical, biosystems in there that are just bringing all this vibrations and noise. And what's the impact going to be on people and the environment?
Well, I'll probably start with explaining what I do for folks like Natelli. So when we're brought in on a project for an acoustical study, the first thing that we're looking at typically is the existing regulatory requirements. For the state of Maryland, that tends to be a pretty straightforward start because unlike a lot of states, Maryland has a code for sound level limits for different zonings, land uses. And then different counties and jurisdictions will refine that as they need to for their own developments. But that's not the only thing that drives what I do. So when we're asked to look at the acoustic impact of something, sometimes the code doesn't tell the whole story. Maryland, for example, has a 55 dBA residential limit for property boundaries. So, and that's a receiver limit. So the receiving property, you're not allowed to create a noise that would exceed that 55 dBA at their property. 55 dBA isn't necessarily the best or worst limit for something like for a data center development, for example. And it's my job to let folks like Natelli know when there might be more they need to do. So the next step we'll usually take is to study the ambient conditions in the area. And we'll look at residential areas, we'll look at the existing acoustics there, sensitive locations like schools or libraries, places where people expect to be fairly peaceful. You want to try and preserve that as much as possible. So we'll study those ambient conditions, and then we'll start to look at that in parallel with something like a data center build out and see how much noise it creates, and we'll compare that not only to the code. The code, I mean, that's the law of the land; it has to be met, but also maybe going above and beyond in some cases where perhaps it's a little quieter in a certain residential area or at a certain school or something like that.
Have you had to make systems that require less noise at, let's say, midnight to 6 in the morning or something?
So data centers can run anytime. So they can run 24/7, and they can have demands for all their cooling systems at different times of day. So we basically have to help them design them for the worst case scenario. So what we're usually looking at is it going to not only meet the code, but also is it going to minimize any sort of impact to the surroundings when all the cooling systems are running at full capacity. And that's how we build our acoustical models for these types of facilities. And that will even include like a generator operating in like a testing scenario, because that's a normal thing that happens. They'll test them for a few minutes often during the daytime, but sometimes that could be during the evening time or some other period. That's all dependent on things that don't have anything to do with sound. We'll just run those generators up, and we'll pick something conservative to make sure that even when those generators are being tested, that they're also meeting the code and minimizing those impacts for those types of scenarios as well. I imagine that there will be questions about low frequency sound. If not, let me know. That seems to be a hot topic right now.
Top question we get is the infrasound.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't
Well,
escape without answering that.
What's that?
You can't escape without talking about that.
Yeah. So there's really three things that I'd like to split that into, because they're all different, and they often get conflated together like they're all one problem, but they're really separate things. There's low frequency sound. That's like the easiest example is that car that's got the subwoofers in the trunk that annoys everybody. So that's low frequency sound. There's also vibration, which is typically we're talking about ground-borne vibration there. We're not talking about, because sound itself is airborne vibration, but when people in my industry talk about vibration, we're usually talking about transmission through solids, so ground-borne vibration. And then there's infrasound, and infrasound by definition is inaudible because it's below the range of human hearing. So it's at frequencies that are extremely low. For data centers, the types of equipment that they use. There's nothing really new for these systems. When I look at data centers, I'm seeing air handlers, exhaust fans, chillers, banks of fans like we were talking about earlier for cooling systems. These are things that I've been working with my entire career. There's not really anything new there. So controlling that across the whole range of frequencies, not only to meet an A-weighted limit, but also to control low frequency elements of that, is all built into the mitigation and controls that we recommend to minimize those impacts I was talking about earlier. And then ground-borne vibration is probably the easiest subject for data centers, because the data centers themselves are very sensitive to vibration. So their equipment by default can't generate any structure-borne vibration, otherwise it would have an effect on their server operations, because they're very sensitive machines. So those types of systems tend to be well isolated for any sort of ground-borne vibration. So that's usually really easily addressed, but just by default, by inherent in the design. And then the last issue that's been brought up is infrasound. And again, I go back to air handlers, exhaust fans, those types of machines. I've been working with them for a long time. They're not known to be sources of infrasound. So, I've gone, ever since these things have started coming up, I've gone back and looked at data from data centers that are operational just to make sure I wasn't missing anything, because I was like, what is happening here? So with these reports, and I don't know who's propagating that information, but at least the designs that I've been looking at aren't they aren't emitting any sort of infrasound that I would perceive to be a problem. So,
what are the technologies that you use to mitigate noise from the data centers?
Oh, it's a great question. So the most cost-effective way to mitigate any noise from machinery is to make the machinery quieter. So the data center folks that build them themselves will work directly with the manufacturers of these equipment, trying to build in as much noise control as they can, just inherently. For example, on the large banks of fans that are being used as heat exchangers or chillers or whatever they're being used for, they'll use low noise fans. They'll utilize interior materials that are inherently quieter or cut down on sound. And then once you get past that point, you've done everything you can for the machine, then you've got to mitigate the path, and we've got a lot of different ways we can do that. We can look at equipment enclosures, and we can look at I'm not fond of the word, but we call them silencers. They don't make things silent, but they make them quieter. So they're basically like mufflers on your car, only they'll be on the exhaust or intake end of a bank of fans. Acoustical barrier walls are used for some sources if they're placed well, usually close to a source of sound. We see mixed results when they're far away from the sources of sound. Like sometimes barriers will be used along like a perimeter wall or something like that. It can be effective, but it's barriers work the best when they're like right up against. We see them a lot for the generator yards. So we'll see them at the ends of the yards to screen some of that sound coming off the ends. We use the buildings themselves. One of the advantages that I'm seeing in this industry that I've never had an opportunity to do for in any other industry. The data center industry loves to talk to us early. Like, how can we position these buildings to block its own sound from getting to the neighborhoods and that type of thing. And that's something all my career I would be brought in and somebody would show me a layout, and the first thing I wanted to do was move a building, and they say, no, you can't move that building. And now they're telling me I can, so I'm very pleased about that. So they listen to those things, and they allow us to help them with their setback distances and things like that to create those buffers for sound. So
just to interrupt there.
Yeah.
I want to just augment that. that comment, because when we do our design, the layout of the buildings themselves, you know there's a quiet side and a noisy side of the building. The utility yard is where all the sound is coming from. And we rotate those buildings. We make sure that when we do the layout that those buildings are all focused in, that side of the buildings are all focused inward. The very first element, that we have an opportunity to address sound is how do we line those buildings up? Make sure that the noisy side is pointing inward. And then Jeff does his study, and he's going to come back and tell me, you need to move this, shift that, put a wall in here, and we just keep adding bits of materials, walls, acoustic absorbing tiles, whatever it may be, till we finally get down to the number that we're shooting for. So it's a back and forth between Jeff and I as to start adding bits, rotating buildings, put this there, slide that over here, till we reach our goal.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt there.
No, it's okay.
No, thank you.
If I may, I wanted to address something you brought up earlier, which was about health and safety issues. I'm a professional engineer, so health and safety of the public is the top of the list. That precedes anything that my client might want to do. If it's going to impact public health and safety, then it becomes a major concern for me. And I think that's probably the case for, I know you're PE and
Yes.
we're licensed. I'm board certified with the Institute for Noise Control Engineers, and they have the same sort of ethics. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
I can just raise the question about the infrasound again. I had a chance to talk to a data center engineer, actually, who said what you said, that none of your equipment actually produces infrasound.
Mhm.
But the problem is when you have, say, fans operating out of sync, things that aren't running together, they produce those beats, which then reflecting off walls or other will, in fact, produce infrasound. So it's not the fact that you're, sure, granted, none of your machinery is creating it straight up, but have you measured that or looked into that kind of secondary creation of infrasound? Because
yeah, again, that's something that those types of problems would be very site specific. Like there'd be something probably inherently problematic, and something else would probably be going wrong, and we'd be looking into why is that malfunctioning and fixing that issue, because the sound from the fan in the first place shouldn't be emitting at such a point where it could interfere with the sound from another fan and actually be audible. That type of problem shouldn't be audible. It shouldn't be happening. But if it does, then they bring me in and I get to solve a fun problem. So.
Well, I'm glad you get to have fun with it, but so you have not encountered that?
I have not encountered. I've been around operational data centers, and like I said, we've gone back and looked at monitoring data for data centers and tried to find these types, because our equipment will measure down into that range. I'm glad I didn't find anything, because the hardest part of infrasound is figuring out what's causing the problem, because you can't hear it. You can't just point to something and say that's what's making the noise.
Right, yeah.
So.
So what is the noise level dBA at a typical property line?
That'll heavily depend on the design and the types of equipment. They're going to be designed, at a minimum, they're going to be designed to meet the regulatory requirements. So if there's a regulatory requirement to meet, say, 55 dBA at a property boundary, it's not going to exceed that. And like I said, if I've already come into this, if they've hired me and I've studied the environment and I think that a lower level is more protective of the public health and safety, then that's what they would be designing to. Something lower perhaps than even 55 or something like that. So
realistically, how low could you go in terms of dBA?
Oh, that's a great question, but I don't really know what the floor would be. I know that if we go, if we look at designs that are getting too quiet, there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, the folks who are building these things are going to tell us they can't do it. I usually look at something like a floor for something as somewhere in the, like you have to go to some pretty quiet parts of the country. But you don't really see noise complaints below about 40 dBA, but that's a really quiet environment. You're probably not going to get that low. I mean, you might get in some of the more rural parts of the Maryland, but I haven't
here.
seen any yet.
Like here,
so.
35 dBA.
35.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean, at that, I don't think that's a design point. That's because, like I said, you don't really get any noise complaints once you're below 40. So somewhere that, if it was 40, 45, I'd probably say that's probably the lowest that you'd ever be able to go, and without getting really expensive. So and then once you get really expensive, they look for somewhere else.
So how do you consider noise with sensitive receptors?
How do I consider noise with?
How do you mitigate the noise for a significant number? So sensitive receptors, there's schools,
Sure,
libraries,
sure.
hospitals,
Yeah.
Nursing homes, anything like that.
Yeah.
Within the area where this facility is, well, there's 2 elementary schools at 0.88 miles away. So what mitigation can you put in place that will protect those students?
So if there are schools and residences, in the vicinity of where this development's going, we would measure those in the ambient conditions there. We'd be looking at not changing those significantly. So there's ANSI has compatibility criteria for things like that, and what we would do is we would compare the existing conditions to some of those compatibility criteria, and then we'd use that as our guide to kind of establish a design point for the project, so that the project remains compatible with that area. The levels itself can vary from place to place, and the mitigations needed to achieve those I've already talked about. How much mitigation any given project will need will just depend on what that design point is.
Jeff, could you discuss the model itself and how it assumes worst case conditions, temperature inversions, everybody's downwind, that type of
Yeah, that's the modeling software we use. It uses ISO 9613 as the prediction standard that's used for calculating outdoor sound. It's getting a little technical, but basically, it's the model parameters itself are kind of set up to be worst case. So when I talked about earlier, when I was talking about like we run up all the cooling systems to full load and we'll turn on some generators in the model. Well, in addition to all that worst case scenario, the model itself is predicting noise to be downwind in every direction, which is not really doesn't really ever happen. So like all the receivers are basically downwind from all the sources. Assumes a moderate temperature inversion, which is another conservative estimate, and uses things like that just to make sure that we're doing things conservatively. So.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
In the interest of time, Rich, you have a question?
I just had one question,
Sure.
Jeff. You may not be able to answer this. Does the end user set a monitoring system to monitor OpEx phase noise emissions, or is that something that you guys are proposing?
That'll depend on the regulatory requirements, and what that's dictating. Typically, when the ones that I've been measuring operational conditions on are usually either that's mandated by a county reg or something along those lines. But I know that they do their own spot checks of their own facilities. Some of the developers do, or the data center end users do, where they'll just go out and measure, make sure that they're staying within their design parameters, even in a case where they don't have a regulatory driver. Okay. They'll still do that. How robust that system is going to depend Right. Unfortunately, in the United States, the regulatory landscape on noise is all over the place. So you get different requirements in different places. So.
And tell me about the state of Maryland.
Yeah, state of Maryland wouldn't have, it'd be complaint driven. So if someone were to complain about the noise, then the end user would hire somebody like me to go out and measure that, put a report together and show whether or not it's compliant with regulatory requirements. So,
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have to move on with the rest of the meeting. We want to thank the whole Natali team for coming in today. You've been very helpful to.
Thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on with the meeting, we have some subcommittee reports, and I'd like to mention to the folks that are here in person. We'll get to your public comments in a minute, but we have on our committee we have FAQs, which frequently asked questions, and there's how many do we have? 30.
Something like that.
About 30 different FAQs on different elements affecting the environment in Calvert County. And I don't know if, by just a show of hands, are you aware of that we have FAQs that you can go ask and find out questions, information? You guys, have anybody been to our site?
Wow, no.
Oh, thank you. Lou. Thank you. Okay, we need a PR campaign on that because that's what we're going to talk about right now is our FAQs. Anybody have any updates? Periodically, we update them, and then we put them for the public to read, whether it's on recycling or whether it's on noise, whether it's on sound and light.
Radon.
Radon is real important in Calvert. So anybody have any updates on FAQs? None? Okay. Moving on, we have public education and outreach. We have the PRAD event coming up October 10th. Is everybody signed up that's going to go?
I have to check my calendar. I don't know.
Okay. It's October 10th, 10 to 4. And then finally, under subcommittee reports, we have guest speakers. Anyone have any guest speakers lined up that they want to invite in?
No, but Summer, you said we have somebody next month, right?
Oh,
Yes, there should be, I will confirm it with legal, but an Open Meetings Act
Open
training
Meetings Act.
for the next meeting, and July 27th.
okay. And then just under general announcements, we have our next meeting for the Environmental Commission is July 27th at 6 p.m. And our last item here is public comments. And I'd like to, I think people have signed up for public comments, and we're opening that up. So here's the guy in behind the scenes. I'm looking at the camera, and I'm just kidding.
We'll do the people who signed up to speak in person first. So first I have Nancy Kraus. And if you can just state your name for the record and then say if you are speaking on behalf of yourself or a group or organization, please.
Good evening. Nancy Kraus speaking for myself. I'm going to start by saying thank you for inviting Natali to speak, but I was extremely disappointed when they all walked out. I mean, I wanted to ask him to stay, but I thought that might be disruptive.
No, I was hoping they would stay. I didn't know they were going to leave.
Yeah, so that kind of speaks to transparency. What are they afraid of? I am not an original Calvert County girl. I bought down here in 2012 to retire. I love it down here, but I'm very concerned about the changes. I have 5 granddaughters and 1 great-granddaughter, and I am extremely grateful that they don't go to school in Calvert County. They go to school in Montgomery County and Arlington, Virginia. My biggest concerns about data centers is the noise impact on our schools. Our children are our future. They're going to be taking care of me. And they need no more stuff thrown on them to impact their health. So, once again, Natali and gang, I am very disappointed that you couldn't stay for public comment. And I also have to say, I'm not really sure your good questions were answered. Yeah. There was a lot of, well, we'll do that study. we'll do that study later, or we'll determine if the noise is too great and then move the building. Well, I don't think you can move the building once it's built. But anyway, thank you for your time. I'm grateful for you. I believe in science. I'm married to a scientist.
Thank you very much.
All right, and before we move on to the next speaker, if anybody online would like to give public comment, could you please raise your hand by pressing *5? And the next speaker in person is Kathy Decker.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Decker, speaking on behalf of Calvert Citizens for Student Safety and Responsible Development. Can you speak a little louder? Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Were you speaking on behalf of yourself or an organization?
On behalf of Calvert Citizens for Student Safety and
Perfect.
Responsible Development.
Thank you.
While we are addressing this specific proposal tonight, we also must acknowledge the other major player, AWS, is attempting to bypass this level of public scrutiny entirely. They are engaging in the very behavior that erodes public trust. It is a matter of basic decency and corporate responsibility to face the public, and it is unacceptable to see developers try to operate in the shadows rather than engaging with the Community Environmental Commission. Regarding the sound, since I will be living between the AWS and Natelli Nightmare, I have visited Ashburn and Sterling and stood on all sides of these buildings. Believe me, all sides emit noise. I have also spoken with residents who have attested to this. To be a stand-up partner in our community, a developer should be willing to step back and allow for a moratorium for necessary studies. In fact, if they have nothing to hide, they would encourage it and welcome it. We must take the time to conduct thorough, independent studies. We owe it to our residents to ensure that industrial development is not prioritized at the expense of the health and safety of our community. Commissioners, I want to thank you for your commitment to our home. You hold the power of recommendation, and that carries immense weight. Keep standing firm for Calvert, our environment, and our future. Lastly, I saw Thomas Natelli come back in. Thank you for joining us. With all due respect, Mr. Natelli, for the sake of public transparency, when the Environmental Commission asks a question, answer it rather than dismissing the question by saying you don't see what the questions have to do with the Environmental Commission. Ms. Rogers, when a question is directed to Mr. Natelli, please let him answer it. Stop trying to pawn it off as a staff question to avoid transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sylvia Batong.
Good evening. I am representing Citizens for Calvert, a 501c3 corporation. We are a hyper-local, community-driven organization dedicated to transparency, accountability, public education, and meaningful civic engagement in Calvert County. Our organization brings together residents, parents, researchers, environmental advocates, and community organizers from across Calvert County. Through education, collaboration, and community engagement, we work to inform, connect, and empower residents while encouraging greater participation in local government and collective action. Everything we do is rooted in the belief that the future of Calvert County should be shaped by the people who live here. We were founded by local residents. We believe community members deserve clear information and honest public process and a meaningful voice in decisions that affect our environment, infrastructure, schools, neighborhoods, and quality of life. We're grateful for the generous contribution of the highly skilled and sophisticated analysis conducted by the Calvert County Environmental Commission, a great voluntary service to our community. We have used your information on the environmental impacts of data centers vis-a-vis human life and health, the fragile ecosystem that is land up for discussion, air and water quality effects, and the impact on local temperature. We're continuing in our efforts to educate our neighbors about the data center proposal and to help the BOCC to fully understand where citizenry stands on the future of our county. We will meet on July 8th at Middleham and St. Peter's Parish Center, Wednesday, July 8th at 6:30. We plan to meet at least monthly on the second Wednesday of each month at 6:30 at Middleham. All concerned citizens are welcome. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jeff Dixon.
Good evening, Commissioners, Environmental Committee. My name's Jeff Dixon. I'll be representing myself, so here goes. Anyhow, the last time we met, we were doing an online thing, and so we had to talk over the phone or whatever. Mr. Mattelli had spoken at it, and one of the statements was about the data center sound. And as far as sound is concerned, we can demonstrate that on our sites that we've been developing our loudest point between 80 to 90 decibels. And by the time it hits the property lines, which are anywhere from 400 to 500 feet, we're at 50 to 45 decibels. Right now, I did a reading in this room at 60 decibels. I find what his statement is unbelievable. So, now, mini Waikoni. Mini Waikoni. What does that mean? Water is life.
Water is life.
Say that again?
Water is life.
Water is life. Water is sacred. Water should be treated that way. Building data centers endangers our water supply by blocking the aquifers from natural rain. These, I mean, whether it's 4 buildings, 8 buildings, it's still blocking the water supply. It endangers us. Our commissioners always talk about preserving the land, and bringing data centers endangers our water supply and our land. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. There are currently 3 speakers online. Megan Farringer, we are ready to receive your comments. Please state your name and address and whether you will be speaking as an individual or as the designated representative of a group. Please press *6 to unmute on your phone or press the unmute button on Teams.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you so much. I am Megan Farringer. I am from Lusby. I will be speaking as a dependent person. Good evening. I first want to echo what so many in Calvert County say about this. That you are the heroes who protect our community. While we're here to protect this fragile area, you continue to be the leading voice to provide our community. So again, we want to thank you for the hard work that you have done. I know that our guest speakers have walked away and one maybe has returned, but I did attend your meeting that you provided at the southern end of the community on May 11th. I left that meeting feeling with the understanding that you'll follow the rules governed by our current VOCC, you'll build an artificial monolith, and then you'll leave it to the end user that you claim to still be in discussion with, while you hightail it to the next state to tear up and have no care what happens to the communities that you have destroyed. I know you're doing your job as you are asked, but we are going to be suffering your project for the rest of our lives while you get to get a paycheck to discredit the Cambridge study that you say had holes in it while not extracting exact evidence to counter is insulting, as you claim that we didn't read the study. While there are no studies done to show the impacts of data centers in a peninsula, Calvert County will not be the subject for a bursting AI bubble to test on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, the next user is Dawn M. We are ready to receive your comments. Please state your name and address and whether you'll be speaking as an individual or as the designated representative of a group. Please press *6 to unmute your phone or press the unmute button on Teams.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, my name is Dawn McNellis. I reside in St. Leonard, And I just want to say thank you to the Environmental Committee for all of your questions that did and did not get answered. But I appreciate all y'all's hard work putting together all the mountains of information. I just want to say that a lot of people have stayed in this area and flocked to this area because of the country living, the water life, the non-industrialism that has plagued the rest of the nation is not here yet. And I don't feel it has a spot here in Calvert County. We need to keep Calvert County country and proper to our roots. Even though I am a transplant, I have so much love for this county and just the community in general. And I've lived where data centers are before. And whether you want to believe it or not, it kind of destroys the community and everybody gets, you know, real crummy with each other. Call it the EMFs or whatever else it's polluting, but I've seen it happen in multiple places. So I don't want to see that happen to Calvert. Thank you for everybody who's trying to fight this monster, trying to invade our county. And let's do what's right for the children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the username Shane, we are ready to receive your comments. Please state your name and address and whether you will be speaking as an individual or as the designated representative of a group. Please press *6 to unmute your phone or press the unmute button in Teams.
Hello, my name is Shane K. from Huntingtown. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Sweet. I'm going to be speaking as an individual. And I wanted to echo everybody else. I, appreciate the Environmental Commission so much for all of this and for asking genuinely good questions that our commissioners are just not. So I appreciate that. And I know AWS dropped out of this meeting, which is a disappointment, but on terms of just Natelli specifically, so many of the answers from Natelli depend on the end user, but I've asked about when they could expect to have a confirmed end user to base those answers off of, and I was told by Mr. Natelli's father, I guess Mr. Natelli the first, well, those end users normally feel more confident signing on to an agreement with a developer they know will actually be moving forward. And then confirmed, that meant we likely would not have that info until after the county has sold the land and approved the project. So we're supposed to just feel at all comfortable just handing the keys over to a shadowy, faceless entity with who knows what interest in mind? I certainly don't. I recommend nothing but pausing this until we have more information, because even the information they can give us is wrong and uninformed, like with the infrasound. So thank you so much for being the voice of reason in all of this, and I hope you can continue to, and I hope our commissioners will listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If anyone else online would wish to speak, please raise your hand now. There are no more online callers.
Thank you, Andrew. We also have 2 last-minute sign-ups for in-person public comment. Lily Sheeline.
Hello, baby.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say this all sounded really great tonight. I mean, I'm impressed. They brought a good team with them. Natelli, I think he's here somewhere, brought a good team. And the information sounded really great. They're taking everything into account. All sounds wonderful. Bottom line for me, listening to this, is that there's one big problem, and that is that this company is hugely invested in the outcome of this project. I've been to school with folks like these. I mean, I know they talked about the right stuff. They talked about species diversity. They had understandable critiques about that paper. Sorry. But the fact is that good data, and I think you probably all know this, good data can be interpreted differently, okay? Legitimately so, but differently. We have a team of people here who have one objective in mind, and they are presenting their interpretation of all of these things. And what we really need here is still an independent assessment, somebody who is not so invested in the outcome of this. Independence, objectivity, and allowing the project to move forward with anything else is hugely irresponsible. And that, for me, is the bottom line, and I hope you guys can understand that and will take that into consideration as well. It all sounds great, but it's not the only way to be looking at this, and we need other minds and other people involved in assessing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last, we have Joanna Graves.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of, I live on Cove Point Road. I'm speaking as an individual. I live on Cove Point Road. I live what will be a mile in between both of these data centers. That also takes it to the fact that I live within a mile of the LNG gas plant. So when you take the two, they're really not that terribly different on the noise, what they put out in pollution, et cetera, et cetera. I can say this, I'm very healthy, other than 2 years after the gas plant was up and running, both myself and my husband were diagnosed with respiratory. We have asthma. I can sit on my deck and see at night the particulates coming through the air. All the things that are around, the lightning bugs, all the life around, it's gone because of the light, pollution, whatever else. The noise. I think some of you that are by Cove Point, you've seen, I invited someone down one day. I said, I want you to hear this. Now, we were promised that, the noise in the walls that are up there were going to be, this saving, this and we can go on with all the talk and that we want, but it really didn't make a bit of difference. You can hear it, and it's almost like 24/7. You have to almost speak above that. So I find it a real hard sell. I've been coming here since I was a baby. In the summer, this was my jam. I do scuba diving, everything else. This is a magical area, and we are all here talking about, save the bay, save this, save the woods. The woods are spectacular. There's growths out in these woods, all the hiking I do that you'll never find anywhere. And to strip it of that is a crime. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's everybody.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here and presenting your positions and your voice. It's part of being good governance, being good residents. We have been listening to you, and we thank you for your input. And also, again, want to thank Mr. Natale for being here this evening and sharing his expertise on data centers. With that, the meeting will be adjourned.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.